Hi guys, so today's video is going to be a book review for Foundryside by Robert Jackson Bennett. This is the first book in an adult fantasy series that if you've heard anything about, you've probably heard about its very complex and interesting magic system. And what I really liked about this magic system was it's definitely a hard magic system. There are rules and limitations, but the limitations are kind of as much as the person's imagination, because it is, in a sense, limitless, which I think is a hard thing to achieve, to have limitations and yet feel limitless at the same time. It kind of feels like the possibilities are endless. How that magic system works, though, and the setup for the story is that we have a very merchant-run civilization. This particular city we have where the rich and fancy and powerful live, and then we also have this part of the city where the poor live. And we have a main character named Sanchia who is a thief who is living in the side of the city, and our main character has this very interesting ability that should not exist, where she can essentially sense information about objects. It makes it very difficult for her to function. She can't really touch very many things without feeling overwhelmed and uncomfortable. She tries not to change her clothes very often because she can kind of sense the history and past of the clothing. This is very abnormal. Nobody really has these abilities, and it's very similar to an extent to the kinds of things that people can do with magic with objects. We have people known as scribers who are able to change the reality of objects. They can give commands to something like a wheel and tell it the wind is blowing and you are turning, and the wheel will respond thinking that is its reality and therefore will turn, and then it will make for some form of transportation. And then you can change the function to think the wind is blowing a different way or that something is pushing it. You can do similar things to weapons, to buildings, to materials. You can also have twinning, which is where you can essentially code things to happen to one object that are happening to another. So if you smash one object, you can make the other object shatter without actually having to touch it, which allows for some very interesting means of explosions. Our main character comes upon something that can essentially rewrite an object's code and convince it to do other things. And this is a very powerful tool. It can essentially render all scribings useless or to this individual's command that has this object. So it is obviously a very powerful, valuable object. So our main character, Sanchia, who is just a thief that wants to find some way to fix whatever's going on in her head because it makes her life miserable. She's just living from one job to the next. She gets this job, doesn't realize what she's gotten herself into, and then chaos ensues. I had mixed feelings for this book. It had everything that I usually want in a book. The best way I can explain it is I love cookies. And it would almost be like if you made delicious, yummy cookies, but then you burnt them a little. I should like everything about them, except for they're just not quite the end result that I was hoping for. And I think it has to do with the tone of the book. I have not really encountered a book with this sort of tone before. And if you have similar tastes to me in books, I absolutely think you should check this book out. I bet you will feel very differently. I think I'm in the minority on this. I still overall enjoyed it. I liked a lot of things about it. I'm curious enough where I might read the sequel, but the tone is interesting because I love campy humor. I love silly moments. I love happy moments, goofy moments mixed in to my stories. And this one may have just had it a little bit too much for me because the main character is rough around the edges, which makes sense given their circumstances. They curse all the time. They never really take things very seriously. They're a little blunt. And then they also have a companion that they speak to who speaks very, very casually. And so the two of them together, for a while, I was thinking, okay, well, it's just these two, because you do get other perspectives. And I really liked getting to learn more about these other perspectives. There's one character in particular that I really enjoyed, and he is very stoic and kind of serious, and he values justice and he wants to do what's right in the world, but he kind of comes from the other side. The grass is greener on the other side sort of thing, but he's trying to make it better for those who are not as wealthy. He's just doing his best to do what's right. I loved this character, and their introduction was amazing. There's the greatest action scenes, I feel like. They're so interesting. The way that they incorporate the magic is great, and so his entrance, it's really good. But between not just these characters, but some other side characters that pop up, it just felt like every scene with multiple characters was kind of goofy, and they would have interesting lines. And it was weird because the tone sort of felt middle grade to YA in a sense, as far as the way the characters spoke and the like boom, boom, boom of the action sequences. And I feel like the best way to describe it is it kind of comes across like a shonen manga, which is manga that traditionally is consumed by young boys. And it even had the kind of gross old man figure who says kind of weird things like, "It'll open for us like a schoolgirl's legs," which I was like, I don't love this quote from what is supposed to be like the old, really eccentric and super smart character. But that's what I mean, like even that character says stuff where it feels like everybody kind of says the silly, goofy stuff, and there's tons of violence. There's definitely a lot of language, and then there's also some references to thothy times. In fact, the main character, being a thief, happens to not once but twice in the book walk in on people having a good time, and just stuff like that where it clashed a little bit for me because it felt a little bit extra campy while also being like the violence is really intense and like really gross, and like I joked before, it's got the like boom 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 type of action, like whoa, big explosion type of stuff, and it just kind of felt like weirdly almost like it was supposed to be for a younger audience but had the complexities in the magic system. And I actually think a lot of intrigue that you find typically associated with adult fantasy, and none of those things are a con. It's just the combination of all of it. I just, something about the combination of all these things it made it difficult for me to ever like really take things too seriously. You know, when there's a really serious scene happening and there's humor that is not necessarily placed quite the way you'd want it, because sometimes you want the humor in those serious moments. It can make it even funnier. But sometimes the humor is just kind of like, yeah, would we really be cracking a joke right now? I kind of felt like that was a lot of the book. That said, I do feel like the action scenes were phenomenal. And I think that the characters, while sometimes the tone and the scenes sort of ended up in goofy one-liners and such, I still feel like the characters were all distinct. The stakes are definitely incredibly high. You think it's going in one direction and all of a sudden it gets even bigger, and then from there it gets even bigger, and it kind of creates this domino effect where once you get to a certain point you sort of have to keep going. And despite the complexities of the magic system, it's a very digestible writing style. It's very easy to get into. I would say this is a fantastic entry point if you are looking to jump into adult fantasy. One thing I will say about the magic system is while I do think that the book is easy enough to get into, there would be times where something crazy would happen and people would be like, wait, so does this mean? And there'd be like some big discovery. And then they'd go to join camp and meet up with their pals, and they'd be like, what happened? And then the character would be like, well, let me tell you. And then it would be like page break after explaining everything. And I was like, dang it, I could have used that little extra bit of confirmation as to what happened myself, because the magic is already complex and there's a lot of things happening that are blowing the minds of the characters who are supposed to know what's going on. And so they're like, wait, this is a possibility? And I'm kind of over here like, wait, this is a possibility? I do kind of wish occasionally when we would get these rundown moments that we would actually have the rundown a little bit. That is such a specific thing that I'm sure is not going to apply to everyone. On the topic of the characters' minds being blown from time to time, I will say sometimes it kind of felt like deja vu. Something would happen, the characters would discover something, and the amount of times in the story that somebody would be like, wait, so are you saying, and then kind of be like, ... and then be like, that's exactly what I'm saying. And like, there'd be a lot of moments kind of like that, like dun dun dun, where if this was a shonen, that would be the end of the anime's episode, and then we'd start fresh, or it'd be a commercial break, and then it would start again. And by the way, I like anime, and I love Full Metal Alchemist, so I'm not trying to put that down. I just think it felt in tone very much like that, but then also combined with some more adult content. The last chunk of the book had some interesting pacing where once you get to a certain point, it is kind of race to the finish line, except for one part where it feels like we had a minor injury and we're trying to like kind of hobble our way back until our muscle cramp gets away, and then we can get back into the race. There was just one part where things are going crazy, and then it's like, okay, now let's all plan and plot some more. And I was just kind of like, because then the characters are like, now I'm going to go get to work on stuff. And then another character be like, I'm going to go work on stuff too. And so you're just like waiting for them to be done working. And then you get back into like, all right, now let's go. And it was necessary, but it was a little bit of a hiccup in the pacing in what would have otherwise been an absolutely roller coaster type of ending, which it still was, just like part of the roller coaster wasn't quite as scary. There were definitely a lot of twists and turns throughout the book, some of which were pretty obvious to me, and there was only one that I was like, oh, okay. And I couldn't tell if the other ones were supposed to be more obvious to distract you from this other one over here, and maybe other people would have figured out this one over here, and so for you everything's predictable, or maybe none of it was predictable for you. It's so hard to tell because people notice different things, and some people don't try to figure things out. But there was a very distinct moment in the book where the characters, something's happening that's not really supposed to happen, and they're like, wait, who's there? Who's talking? And I'm like, this thing. Like, isn't it obvious, like, based off of what someone else told you about this place, this is what's happening? And they're just like, who could this possibly be? Wait, could it be? And I'm like, yes, can you get to this conclusion a little sooner? Because even dumb old me, who's confused by some of the magic, understands what's happening right now. So can you, like, get there already? Sometimes that would happen. And like I said, I can't tell if it was just supposed to be that way so that other reveals were way more shocking, like the author is like letting you think you're smart so that those things over there will be a surprise, which it could very well have been, but I can never tell. I can never tell because it's such a different reading experience from one person to the next. I just found basically all but one of the twists and turns to be kind of obvious. All of that said, I definitely think that one twist for me was really well done, and I think that the magic system is so interesting, and there's so many questions left unanswered, and it is easy to get into, that I am still intrigued enough where I think I'm going to pick up the next one. I think most people are going to love this. I think if you're a fan of Sanderson's works, if you're a fan of anime too, I think that you will probably really enjoy this very fast-paced, action-packed, good old time. Let me know your thoughts on this book. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Have you read the sequel? What were your thoughts on that? But anyway, thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.